Let's Talk FGM is an initiative of Hacey Health Initiative in partnership with Women Radio 91.7 and funded by the United Nations Trust Fund to end violence against women. Let's Talk FGM is that program that basically discusses and encompasses everything relating to female genital mutilation. The practice of cutting or mutilating parts of the female genitalia is a common practice in our society. People engage in them most of the time for cultural, religious, and many other unjustifiable reasons. Now, out of 200 million female genital mutilation survivors in 30 countries of the world, Nigeria contributes 10% to the abuse of women and girls, which is approximately 19 million, and the federal government has commended 5 states over its commitment to end the menace. Now, some of these states include Oyo, Ekiti, Osun, Ebonyi, and Imo states. Today, to talk progress on ending FGM across FGM prevalent states in southwest Nigeria is my guest, Dr. Esther Schumer, Gender and Reproductive Health Analyst at United Nations Population Fund. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Esther.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. How are you doing today?
Very well. Thank you.
Good to hear. Good to hear. You can contribute by calling the number 07000 917 917. 07000 917 917. That's the number to call. You can also send in your text or WhatsApp messages to 0703 175 6537. I'll take that again, 0703 175 6537. You can also listen live on the website www.wfm917.com. Of course, www.wfm917.com. You can also download the Women Radio app on Google Play Store and install it on your phone, and of course get the opportunity to listen to us live as well. Now, Dr. Esther, we've been talking so many conversations around female genital mutilation, and to a large extent we've covered most of the cultural practices or cultural beliefs that inspire female genital mutilation in certain areas of the country and even the world in general. But to a large extent, this program is basically to reiterate that female genital mutilation is wrong. It's a human rights violation. It's a crime, and it should definitely be eliminated. Now, in my intro, I mentioned that there are some states that the federal government of Nigeria has commended, being that they have done a good job as regards their efforts towards elimination of female genital mutilation. Let me ask you what you think they're doing that other states can emulate. What do you think they're doing right that other states can emulate? Let's begin with that as a background.
All right. Let me say that the 5 states which you earlier mentioned are the eye-boarding states in Nigeria. And as such, those states have received support from the United Nations Population Fund, from the state government, from the CSOs, and from non-governmental organizations to move them from where they were before with high prevalences to where they are now with their prevalences dropping by almost 30% across them. For example, with Osun State has dropped from 78% to over 45%, Ebonyi from 74 to 53, Ekiti 72 to 57%, Imo from 68 to 61%, Oyo 66 to 31.7%. I must say that having this drop, a lot went into having this drop. And many of the things that were done, one which I will state several of them that have been done and particularly supported by the United Nations Population Fund, is putting in place policy and legal framework to strengthen the rights of women, particularly working with the states to domesticate the violence against persons prohibition Act that was passed in 2015 in the various states. Part of what was also done is for us to advocate and engage with the traditional leaders and the religious leaders who have great influence at the custodian and they're the gatekeepers, to advocate with them on the fact that FGM does not have any medical benefit. The reason for why FGM is being perpetrated on women does not, and studies have shown, does not stop any of those things that they've purported that FGM would stop, and show them survivors who are going through a lot of both health challenges, psychological challenges, and make them see that this practice is a practice that should be dropped. So apart from advocating with the traditional religious leaders, we've also engaged with men. We know that many of the engaging with the men and boys does go a long way, because in taking this decision about whether a girl is mutilated, it takes either the household head, who is a male, or the older male child in the family to take that decision. So it's engaging with them to promote positive masculinity, and then for them to see the points that women should be respected, and women should not be tortured or subjected to these practices that, in quotes, supposedly prevents them from being promiscuous or staying in line with the tradition. The other things we've also done is to actually engage with girls. So we don't wait until the girls are mothers. We actually engage with them from when they're young in school, knowing what their rights are, what are those practices that are beneficial, what are those them, and for them to be able to stand up for their rights. And equally, we also have put in place trained community members, and including survivors, to actually conduct door-to-door sensitization with community members, conduct dialogues with them, to make them see that FGM is not a practice that should be hung on to, even if you want to do rite of passage for any girl from being an adolescent to an adult, or even from when they're young. So what we also put in place is for communities who come out to say, oh yes, we've seen that this practice is wrong, then we put in place community surveillance teams. Those community surveillance teams actually monitor, track, and follow up to see that the community is truly complying. And we also put in place research. We know that for everything we do, everything has to be evidence-based. So definitely. We do a lot in the areas of research to look at what are the facilitators, what are the triggers, what are the things that make communities who are still resistant, and if there are hotspots that do exist, what makes those hotspots exist, and also those are the things that have been put in place by the UN and also with the CSO. And let me also say that media is not left out. The role of creating awareness through radio stations like yours, through the local, engaging with the local radio, the local TV, jingles, to further educate women, further educate men, and ensure that we eliminate FGM in Nigeria. So those are the various interventions that have been done actually to move these states from where they were as high prevalent now to their prevalences dropping by over 30% to 40%. Thank you.
Dr. Esther, I have to say thank you for that very detailed explanation, because to a large extent, my question was, what do you think these states are doing that other states can emulate? And you really broke it down to basically what they have been doing, which in collaboration with the UN has definitely had that significant impact on their prevalence rate when it comes to FGM. Now, there's some things you mentioned, because I was taking notes. So some things you mentioned stood out to me. Research was one of them. So a lot of people talk about how important research is, but on the other hand, a lot of people also talk about how Nigeria does not quite do as much research as they should when it comes to a bunch of different subject areas. Now, female genital mutilation, we have concluded, or we've established in the course of previous episodes, that Nigeria is one of those countries that heavily participates in female genital mutilation. And if you include or if you take out research, you would not really get how many people are really impacted by this. Now, when you mentioned research, you talked about facilitators, triggers, and the existence of hotspots, if there are. In the course of your research, what are some of these facilitators that make people still engage in this? Because over 30% is significant improvement, but it's not complete elimination. That means there's still ways to go. So what are some of those triggers? What are some of those facilitators that still need work in these states and in other states as well?
All right. The facilitators that have actually been found is the fact that, which is one of the main one that has been found, is that FGM is an expression of a social norm. And as such, holding on to that norm that daughters or girls must be mutilated is one of the major facilitators. Two, the fact that you have women or mother-in-laws wanting that their daughters are not stigmatized for not being mutilated is another facilitator.
That's an interesting one.
Yeah, the third also is that in some communities, when a girl is not mutilated, that also stands as a barrier to her being married off. So you find out that once she's known not to have been mutilated, then that serves as a barrier. And as such, you find out that a mother would say, I'm sorry, this girl needs to be mutilated because I want you to be married. And so that I am not stigmatized that my daughter is not mutilated. Another is you have those who are the custodian of the law, being the traditional rulers, holding on tenaciously that this is a culture and this is a practice that has been passed on from generation to generation, and that there are even a group of people or families that this practice is domiciled in, and as such, those families believe that they are doing a service to the land and to their communities by still holding on to that right that they have as being the circumcisers. So those are the facilitators. And then also the new things that have been found is you now have transborder FGM. You now have people moving from one community into another community and bringing in their culture and saying that in our culture we mutilate girls, and so they begin to mix with the new environment they're in and begin to practice FGM. So those are the new things that are also being found, that, you have this transborder thing, people moving with their culture that they've come with to another society or another community and influencing that community that it's a practice they must adopt and they must go by. Another which has been found is that quacks also tell women that, mutilating you with old equipment predisposes you to infection. But there are newer ways to doing it that are cleaner and that would not bring about in court those complications that you think can come. So those are the facilitators that have been seen to, in research, that have been seen to be responsible for the prevalence that you still see in those areas.
Your last point, we're referring to the medicalization of FGM. Yes. And we've talked about that as well. And just as you've rightly stated, there are people who believe that, because we're not using traditional circumcises anymore, we can still do it, but this time it's in a much, much more cleaner atmosphere, and it won't give you infections, this, that. And in reality, it might not give you infections, but it doesn't take away the impact that being mutilated has on a woman, on a girl. So this brings me to my next question. Medicalization of female genital mutilation, is it still prevalent in these states?
Well, thank you very much. UNFPA and its other partners actually collaborated with the Federal Ministry of Health and other regulatory bodies like the Medical and Dental Council, the Nursing and Midwifery Council, and the Health Technology Group to advocate with them that their members should actually not be the ones perpetrating this practice and violating women. And UNFPA, beyond their advocacy and even looking at their in-service curriculum and their in-school curriculum to integrate in the dangers of FGM, why it should not be perpetrated and the complications. UNFPA also went further to train health workers across this high burden state. So beyond engaging with at the national level, we've also engaged with the state chapters of the associations, both for the medical and also for the nurses. We've also had engagements with them, advocacy with them, that any member of theirs that is caught in this act, actually their license would be taken off. And they actually signed a pledge to it that their association will stand by holding on to the rights of women, and that any of their practitioners that are found would actually be liable. And we also went further to train all the healthcare workers, all the healthcare workers currently across the high burden states. We've trained close to about 600 healthcare workers who work across the primary health facilities, the secondary health facilities, and the tertiary health facilities, giving prevention talks. When they go on outreach, they look at women and girls who are at risk to protect them. And for those who may be survivors, they also provide them with care, and those who may need referral, they do provide referral. So beyond advocating at the national and the state level with the health regulatory bodies, we've also gone further to train the healthcare workers who work in the facilities, and that training did go a very long way. And beyond training them, we equally also do monitoring and supervision for those healthcare workers on the field. And in addition to top the icing, every one of them signed a pledge that if they are part of this practice and they're caught this and this, particularly taking off their license, and they would face the law. So every one of them who are seeing the women and who are providing protection services, providing clinical care to them, have pledges that they've signed and that are handed over to their health regulatory bodies. So those are the interventions that UNFPA has put in place to be able to curb medicalization of FGM in those states.
Thank you very much, Dr. Esther. We're still talking about progress on ending FGM, that's female genital mutilation, across FGM prevalent states in southwest Nigeria. It's 20 minutes past 2, and this is still Let's Talk FGM on Women Radio 91.7. Let's Talk FGM is where we discuss everything pertaining to female genital mutilation, and it is an initiative of Hacey Health Initiative in partnership with Women Radio 91.7 and funded by the United Nations Trust Fund to end violence against women. This is still Let's Talk FGM.
The news says it all. Women Radio 91.7.
Mama Dora, bring Dora, come on. Papa Dada, don't come circumcise us.
You want circumcise your pikin? This generation where everybody don't know say circumcision no good at all. Now you want destroy your pikin life. Papa Dora, you don't know say person wey pay somebody to do circumcision, and person wey do the circumcision, now all of them go prison wey fit reach like 4 years, and dem fit still even pay 200,000. If you give person ordinary advice, say make dem do circumcision, you go fit go prison for like 2 years and still pay like 100,000 fine money. In short, tell my phone make I call this law enforcement agents to go arrest you. They do not good.
You don't circumcise Dora again, eh? Papa Dada, carry your yama knife come on my house. Only self go report you.
Circumcision no good at all. As e dey cause plenty health palava for girls' body. My people, if you hear or see person wey wan circumcise any girl, sharply go to law enforcement person near you, or make you call 0812 467 0069. Female circumcision no good. Make we join hands stop am.
Na this health initiative through im Stop Cut project wey dey funded by United Nations Trust Fund to end violence against women bring una this message. Yes, sir. Let me like.
I found out that doing that.
Ladies and gentlemen, what's going on?
The comic is starting.
I go by the name 59.
You already know Terry from India live and direct.
I go by the name J1 Zima for the call me. Right now, you're listening to WFN 91.7.
22 minutes past 2 on Women Radio 91.7. This is still Let's Talk FGM on Women Radio 91.7. Nigeria's only radio station for women and their families. If you're just tuning in, you are welcome. Today on Let's Talk FGM, we're discussing progress on ending female genital mutilation across FGM prevalent states in southwest Nigeria. My name is Sumto Titilayo Ajama, and I have with me my guest here today, Dr. Esther Schumer, Gender and Reproductive Health Analyst at United Nations Population Fund, UNFPA. You can call in to ask questions, contribute. Let me hear your reactions on the subject matter today. And the number to call is 07000 917 917. 07000 917 917. Once again, the number to call is 07000 917 917. You can also send in a text or a WhatsApp message to 0703 175 6537. We have a call. Hello, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Could you turn down...
Ambrose. My name is Ambrose.
Mr. Ambrose, good afternoon. Thank you for calling. Could you turn down the volume of your radio, please?
I've done that. I treat your guest. If I may ask, this FGM, is it religious or cultural? Before I even know what to say. Because in the Bible, I know that Adam was, male children were circumcised.
That's right.
Or female were not circumcised.
That's right.
Now, why I'm saying this is because I appreciate the good job that your girlfriend is doing and your guest there. Now, if we have been able to assert the fact that FGM is damaging to the female organ, why are we allowing culture when there is already an existing law by the federal government that these things should not be done? Secondly, what about the National Orientation Agency, the local government? Because education is knowledge. Some of these hinterland, I'm happy that your guest is talking about the southwest. Some people don't even know it is okay, but I want to encourage them to go further to make sure that they collaborate with the state. You see, these are things that I expect the government to really, put pressure on, so that they can go to the hinterland where we use crude method to motivate these girls, young girls. When I was very young in the 70s, I was there when I saw where they did it, and the girl was just 7 years old, and people gathered and they motivated her. So I'm hoping that they should go beyond all of this and, the National Orientation Agency, the state government, and all of that. I think this is very dehumanizing to the female. Sorry, very quickly, you talked about some places where they would say that you should not marry. Thank God the world has evolved. If you don't want me to marry, I can go and marry elsewhere. But I marry for my community.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ambrose.
We need to really, look at all of this and stop all of this, battery.
Absolutely. That's why we're here. Thank you very much, Mr. Ambrose. Thank you for calling. To a large extent, the comments made by Mr. Ambrose were in reference to some of the things you had earlier said. So is there anything you'd like to say in response to that, particularly his point about the National Orientation Agency and how much more effort needs to go into that?
Okay, let me say this, that we are working and we have been working with the state and at the local government level, because in all the states you have the state technical committee that comprises of the Ministries of Health, NOA, National Orientation Agency, the Nursing Council, that all stakeholders, including at the state and at the local level, do come together and look at ways of profiling solution to reducing FGM in the state. So we carry the states along, and including even the Ministry of Justice, in ensuring the domestication and implementation of this law, because we know that in the VAP law, FGM is criminal. And beyond engaging with those stakeholders, at the local level, I mentioned that we look at community members after engaging with the traditional leaders who then are convinced. We then ask them to select community leaders, community members, and even past survivors, youth leaders, religious leaders, who would train. We take them to 2 to 3 days training, let them know what FGM is, why we're making them to want to go out. And part of what they do is to do what we call door-to-door sensitization. So they go from door to door, and they equally also do what we call intergenerational dialogue. So they bring the old and the young, and then they dialogue together and talk about FGM not being beneficial. This is what it has done, and how can we as a community banish this out of our system. And beyond the dialogues, everyone plus the law enforcement agent, the traditional leaders, the youth, then come together and have a consensus that in this community, we are saying that FGM will no longer be a practice. And if anyone is caught, that person is liable. And all this I'm mentioning is done at the grassroots level, and it's by women-led group in those communities. So we identify women who are already working there. Those women, we build their capacity to do all that I've mentioned, advocate, train champions, help the champions go door to door, organize the dialogues, both the international dialogues. They go to schools, engage with market women, riders. So they do all of that at the community level. And when the community feels that, oh, we are ripe, we are sure that everybody is on the same page, then we do what we call a community declaration. And in that community declaration, in the presence of government, they then sign an oath and a pledge, which is filed away with the government, with the Ministry of Women Affairs. And it's signed in front of the police.
Okay.
And, yes, so it's filed away. And as such, if anyone in that community is found, that is a document that stands in that person's face that you've been part of this declaration, and as a community that this is no longer a practice. And once you're found in that practice, then you are handed over, because
to the police, of course.
Yes, and part of what we also do is to, at the entrance of those communities, we have signboards that says that this community has declared abandonment. FGM is no longer a practice. Anyone caught is going to face the law. So we have those layers that we put in place. And to top the layer of just erecting the signboard, we also have that layer where there are community members who we call the surveillance team. So they live within the community. They look out for, this woman is pregnant. Once she's delivering, they're following her up. The healthcare worker at the facility is also following her up, that she's not mutilated, she's not traveling to another village, or there's no mother-in-law intimidating her. So we have those layers that those community surveillance team monitor, they track, and they ensure compliance. And then I'm happy the speaker said it has no cultural, no spiritual, no religious benefit. There's nowhere in the Quran, as well as in the Bible, where it's been said that until you mutilate your daughter because she's pure. So it's continuous engagement, and like I said, has helped us reduce the prevalence. Yes. Continuous engagement with the gatekeepers as well as with the religious leaders has helped us to drop this. And let me say to the speaker, you have so much passion about ensuring FGM is eliminated. I want to give him a charge and a call to action that he goes to his community, his local community, to engage with them. And if that practice is still on, he should stand as a voice for women and to engage with his local councillors, religious leaders, community leaders, that there's a law which makes this criminal, and that he will not stand there to allow them continue to mutilate the girls.
I appreciate the last part particularly, and I'll tell you why. Because a lot of people speak against this, but they don't do anything about it. So their voices are really loud, but their voices when it comes to action is non-existent. So thank you for that. And that goes out to you as well, not just to Mr. Ambrose, it goes out to you as well, who believes in the elimination of female genital mutilation. So don't just talk about it, don't just pay lip service, do something about it, and let your community know that you stand against female genital mutilation. All right, so we're still talking about the progress so far in FGM prevalent states, and there's another part that I want us to address. You can still call in. The number to call is 07000 917 917. 07000 917 917. You can also send in a text or a WhatsApp message to 0703 175 6537. Dr. Esther, we have another call.
Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Yes, my name is Ambrose. Where I come from, it has been eliminated even more than 30 years ago. More than 40. All my younger ones, they are 40 and above now. Talk less of now. You don't find out where I come from. What is that? It's eliminated. Nothing like that. So I just want to confirm to you that where I come from, there is nothing like that.
Understood. Thank you. And of course, that should extend to other states that still do this practice. Now, let's talk about these laws. You mentioned earlier that you, in the work that you're doing as part of efforts to end female genital mutilation, there has been this collaborative effort between the medical field, the state government as well. In the process of all of this, particularly when you mentioned that the agreement with the medical board and all the people who are in the medical field that were involved in this training was that your licenses or their licenses would be revoked and they would be made to face the law. And then he also said, okay, in some of the states as well, it's clear that it's a criminal act and of course liable to punishment by law. These laws that exist, particularly in reference to the Violence Against Persons Prohibition Act, these laws that exist, how active would you say that they are in this state, since we're using these states as a reference? You can give me an umbrella response after, but specifically I want to know how it applies to these states specifically.
Okay, thank you very much. The Violence Against Persons Prohibition Act, like I earlier mentioned, in the 5 eye-boarding states, they've actually been domesticated, and the VAP actually, the state domesticated VAPs criminalizes female genital mutilation. So, and that is serving as a deterrent to the practice and is empowering the states to put in place mechanisms to further promote the rights of girls and women. But let me also say that we're making progress with the implementation of the provisions in the VAP law. We're making progress, and
because believe what, let me say, and I'm sure you'll agree with me on that.
Yes, I do. But let me say this, that we have equally also had engagements with the judiciary in those states and also with the law enforcement. The engagements we've had with the judiciary is for us to understand the law, understand the provisions in the law, and understand the role of the judiciary in ensuring that the law is implemented, and in ensuring that when the law is implemented and the judiciary stands up by educating when someone perpetrates this act, it goes a very long way. And we've had those engagements with the judiciary across board. Though I would say that we're not there yet, we need more sensitization to ensure that it's implemented, and also with the law enforcement in those states. We actually have also had engagements and even trainings with the law enforcement agents, taking them through their state-specific VAP laws, understanding the provisions and the law, understanding their roles, understanding the punishments and the punishments that come with the offenses, including that of FGM. We've done that, and we are getting there because we've recorded in some of the states arrests of perpetrators. So we are getting there. For us to have come from the point of arrest to the point of those of conviction, we were not there before. But now, in terms of those who have been convicted because of FGM, that is ongoing and we're making progress. and we're making good progress.
That is good news.
Yes,
that is very
good progress, because we're having the judiciary, implement what is in the law, particularly in relation with FGM, and the law enforcement putting in their bit to arrest the perpetrators, irrespective of who they are and their status. And let me also say that the First Lady is also in the states also play a very great role in not only advocating, but to ensuring that perpetrators are brought to book.
I was actually going to ask about that, because we've been talking about women-led organizations and all these women in all these different states that are very active, because you said you identify these women, build capacity in them so that they can have the means and resources that it takes to go the long way when it comes to really advocating, and not just by words now, but making sure that all the way down to door-to-door sensitization, as you mentioned, is actually being done. So, of course, I was going to ask about the role of the First Ladies, and I'm glad that you mentioned that that's an important aspect for you as well. Another thing you did mention earlier is in-school curriculum. We've talked about how important it is for female genital mutilation, or the elimination of, let me put it this way. We talked about how important the advocacy against female genital mutilation is, particularly, and why it should be brought down even to primary schools, secondary schools, so that these young ones can know that, okay, this is what happens, and this is what should not happen. So it happens, but it shouldn't be. And this is what to do. This is how to know about it, so that as they grow, they know better. So what does the in-school curriculum contain, and how impactful has it been?
Okay, let me say this, that the curriculum that I earlier mentioned is that of those who are nurses, doctors, which I mentioned, that has in it a portion that talks about FGM, that talks about why FGM is a harmful practice, the complications of FGM, and if you as a health worker come across any survivor who has FGM, what you should do to manage their complications. How can you protect girls that are at risk? So that is in the curriculum for those who are in the medically inclined area. But that does not say that the family life health education that we have, and also some of our new subjects that we have in schools currently now, look at issues around gender equality, look at issues around harmful practices, and FGM is one of them. They talk about early marriage, talk about female genital mutilation, talk about the widowhood rights. So some of our subjects for the in-school actually do address these practices, including FGM. So you have young girls who know that FGM is a violation of their rights, and they should not allow themselves to be subjected to it, and there are laws that protect them from being subjected. So that already you have in different subjects that are addressing gender equality, gender-based violence, and even FGM as well.
Thank you for that. I really needed to make reference to that, because that is one of the recommendations that we've received in the course of previous programs that would help further the cause of the elimination of female genital mutilation.
Okay, maybe at this point I should add that we also organize girls' boot camps. Girls' boot camps is a 3-day sleep-in residential camp for girls in the high burden states and for those who may be at risk. And in those camps, part of what the girls are exposed to is educating them about why FGM, they should not be subjected to FGM, why they are going to be a voice, what are their rights, what can they do, the contents of the law simplified for them to know what the offenses are, what the punishments that come with the offenses. And in those boot camps, the girls are also, they have engagements with with government officials, those from the Ministry of Education, those from the Ministry of Women Affairs. They also have engagement with survivors, past survivors, to share their story and to make them know that you should not allow any harmful practice subject you, and that saying no to a harmful practice does not make the end of the world. And so far, with those camps, with the boot camps, we've covered close to about 2,000 girls. And we also have those who had been to the camps before who then come in as volunteers to engage with the other younger girls. So we have that capacity building packages that we also do at the community level. Many of these girls that I'm talking about are brought from those communities, within the high boarding states.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
I think that's a direct response approach. Because truth be told, it's one thing to learn, and it's another thing to internalize it enough to teach other people. So I definitely think that that's a direct response approach, and that definitely helps. Now, you talked about the in-school curriculum where you mentioned that they're educated about female genital mutilation, what not to do, how to speak out. Now, in reference to speaking out, what's the best way to do that, or what has been the best way so far that has worked, and that you would recommend for other states to take an initiative from? Speaking out and just getting the information to the right authorities on this subject of female genital mutilation.
All right, in terms of speaking out, particularly from the perspective of the young girl,
yes.
I earlier mentioned to you that in those camps, we have those girls who have gone through the camp, much older, in the university. Some have passed out, some have married. And then those girls actually serve as mentors to the younger ones, who provide support to them when they have to engage on school assembly, because most times when those girls leave the camps, that's not the end of the boot camp. So their teachers actually come with them. So their teachers too have sessions. So those teachers and also the past attendees of the camp also serve as mentors to them and support system. So part of what they're to do, or they take away from the camp, is that on the assembly, that teacher who has come with them is also going to speak with the principal who gave approval for the girls to come, to allow them have talks on the assemblies. So they have slated days when they're allowed to come to the assembly to give talks. And also for the internationally recognized days, particularly the Zero Tolerance Day for FGM, the International Day for the Girl Child, the International Day for Women, you have those girls also coming up to talk on assembly as well. And to cap it up, we actually have school clubs. So there are school girl clubs where those girls and their mentors meet together. They talk to them, tell them what you should say when you're advocating, what are the key facts, what are the benefits of you speaking up, what are the benefits of you not speaking up. So we have a holistic program that brings a girl who comes from those communities who may be scared, afraid, to a phase where she sees the life experience of somebody who has gone through FGM. And she sees those who are ready to provide support to her, and her capacity is built, particularly the advocacy skills, the communication skills. And then she comes on assembly and talks to other girls, educates other girls, and tells them, if peradventure you want to talk to me, or you're going through any challenge, or you feel you may be at risk, please speak with me. And one thing we cap it up is we have helplines across the states. So there are helplines that the girls are also giving information about, and as such, if it goes beyond their level of speaking up, then they call the helpline, and then there's somebody who responds to them, because most of the helplines are situated within the Ministry of Women Affairs, Ministry of Justice, and also with the women-led NGOs and with the youth groups.
Effective. Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Esther. We're still talking about, this is Let's Talk FGM on Women Radio 91.7, and we're still talking about the progress on ending FGM across FGM prevalent states in Southwest Nigeria. Feel free to call in to ask questions and of course to just make your voice heard on the program, particularly as it pertains to female genital mutilation. You can go ahead and call the number 07000 917 917. 07000 917 917. You can also send in your text or WhatsApp messages to 0703 175 6537. 0703 175 6537. Dr. Esther, you mentioned earlier about these survivors. There has been repetition of the word survivors because they're involved in the campaign. They're involved in the advocacy. And I started thinking about other people who have other survivors who are going through a hard time as regards their personal experiences. And they find it hard to talk about it, and there's no safe space for them, basically. Is there any arrangement or program focused on creating that system, that safe space for survivors to talk about their experiences and, of course, just go through any form of rehabilitation if needed for them within these states?
Thank you very much. I earlier mentioned that we trained healthcare workers, and those healthcare workers, part of what they do is to give prevention message, is at the different service delivery points within the primary healthcare facilities, the secondary healthcare facility, and the tertiary health facility. And beyond those health talks when they're given, hands is also extended to women who may have experienced this practice in the past. And so beyond those health talks, the women come forward, the health workers who have been trained provide counseling, psychosocial counseling for them. For those women, they're equally examined to know the extent of the mutilation. And for those who need to have further care beyond those at the primary healthcare facilities, they're referred. And like I said, because we have an array of healthcare workers that are trained across the primary, secondary, and tertiary level, they're referred for services. Some may have to go through, we call it defibrillation, if it's type 3, that is, the small opening is expanded, and the pain and they feel during menses and all that is relieved for them. And then for those who may be going through post-traumatic stress disorder, like I said, because the healthcare workers have been trained as psychosocial counselors as well, they go through psychosocial sessions. So those facilities that have trained healthcare workers are in quote their safe spaces, and also we have hotlines, and those hotlines they're manned by trained personnel. So those hotlines are also a space, virtual space they can call and also allay and express their pain, and they are adequately referred if it's beyond what the hotline can handle. And equally, we also have the sexual assault referral centers. The sexual assault referral centers are one-stop centers, and most of the states have them, and UNFP has supported many of the states to set up sexual assault referral centers. And those sexual assault referral centers too are also safe spaces that they can go to. And some of this states also have what we call the youth-friendly health services, if it's a young girl who's experienced it. Because they have trained personnel who are in the youth-friendly services, they could also go in there as well, as it serves as a safe space for them too. And even within the school, like I said, there are school clubs who have teachers that are trained, who have mentors who go in there. So you have an array of safe space, from the health facility to the sexual assault referral center, to the hotlines, to the school clubs, and even to the community, the female-led CBOs. We particularly work with the female-led CBOs because we know that they understand the plight. So those female-led CBOs too serve as also a safe space for survivors. So there are an array of safe spaces that survivors can access and express their feelings, get care, get services that they need.
Absolutely. These hotlines, are they the same? Is it the same hotline across these states?
It's a special number, and those special numbers, each state has its own special number that is being used, and the female-led CBOs and NOA publicizes those numbers within the states. Yeah.
Okay. Finally, Dr. Esther, you talked earlier about engaging men in this advocacy. You would agree with me that no matter how many times women talk about the impact of female genital mutilation on them, it's very important that we get the buy-in of the men as well, because just as you rightly stated earlier, a lot of the time the decision for the child or for the young girl to be mutilated is largely taken by the head of the household, which of course is the man or the older male child in the family, as you said. So how impactful has the engagement with men been? And do you see that progressing going forward?
Yes, the engagement with men, because for us, engaging with men has changed and brought about a paradigm shift in our programming, because the men and the boys, we engage with boys and the men, it has brought in a new shift, because now the men see that truly my wife complains about these health challenges. Oh, it's related to this practice. My wife talks about this. It's related to this practice, and it's a consequence. And for the young boys, they're made to understand that you do not express masculinity by abusing someone or subjecting someone or taking their rights from them through a practice. And they're made to see and made to engage with survivors. Engaging with those survivors bring real life to what we speak to.
Absolutely, I agree
and
with
that has actually helped to make a lot of progress, such that we have coalition of men. We also have men within the champions that go and do door to door. You also have men who serve as part of the surveillance team. So they look out for this woman is pregnant, they monitor her, they engage with their husband, they make sure that the girl is not mutilated. And also engaging with the traditional rulers who are men has done a lot for us, because they now stand as the ambassadors who say that I would not allow anyone to be mutilated, any girl in my community to be mutilated, and they also work along with the champions and the coalition, the male coalition, to push forward the cause of eliminating FGM in their community. So working with men, like I said, has brought about a paradigm shift in many of the communities that we work in and across the states.
Thank you very much, Dr. Esther. This has been a largely enlightening conversation, and I want to thank you for taking the time to join us today.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you again for tuning in. Of course, I hope you have been able to learn more than one thing or two in the course of today's conversation. And of course, thank you again to Dr. Esther Schumer. Thank you for calling in. And this is what we call it a wrap on Let's Talk FGM today. Wednesdays, 2 p.m. is the time. So make sure to tune in to Women Radio 91.7 as we talk female genital mutilation and condemn the practice. Let us join hands together to stop female genital mutilation today. To report cases of female genital mutilation, call 0812 467 0069 0812 467 0069. You can get more information on stopcot.hacey.org. stopcot.hacey.org. A big thank you as well to the producer Adenike Kodri. Whatever you do, continue to talk about the harmful effects of female genital mutilation, because believe me, there is no benefit whatsoever. Thank you very much once again. My name is Somto Titilayo Ajama. Good afternoon.
Àṣàkẹ́ Yéṣu kú lè rán pẹ́. Ṣebí ìyá àgbà onígi ló fẹ́ dábẹ́ fún wọn.
Mi ò fẹ́ dábẹ́ fọ́mọ mi. Àwọn àdúgbò ẹgbà wọ́n o. Wọ́n fẹ́ dábẹ́ fọ́mọ ẹgbà wọ́n o. Àwọn ọmọ fẹ́yìn ló fẹ́ dábẹ́ fọ́ṣàkẹ́. Ìyá àgbà mi gígan ni wọ́n sì pé pé kó wá dábẹ́ fún.
Ṣebí ìjọba ti ní ohun tó léwu ni. Èèwọ̀ sí ní láti máa dábẹ́ fún ọmọbìnrin.
Ṣebí nǹkan tí wọ́n fi yé bàbá bọ́lá lọ sí ẹ̀wọ̀n ọdún lẹ́yìn nígbà ọ̀nà. Ìbẹ̀rẹ̀ jáwọ́ nínú gbogbo tí wọ́n fẹ́ fẹ́ àwọn lè. Ìpẹ́lọ́pàá sí.
Àbísí ẹ ti fẹ́ kọ́mọ yín kú. Àwọn ọmọ pé ohun tó léwu ni. Àwọn òwúrọ̀ ọ̀làjú ló fẹ́ bá àṣà àti ìṣe wa jẹ́. Ó yá ẹja lọ lé àdábẹ́mọ́ o.